Well, hello. Welcome once again to Pale Balloons and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. William Billy Ritchie is a Scottish multi-instrumentalist primarily noted for his keyboard playing. In fact, he was probably rock's first lead keyboard player, even predating Keith Emerson and Rick Wakeman. Billy cut his teeth in a couple of bands in the early to mid-60s before venturing into uncharted territory with 1, 2, 3 in 1966, which may have been the very first progressive rock band. Mr. Ritchie not only played organ and piano, but added some acoustic and electric guitars, vocals, and composed and wrote most of the band's material. Filling out the unit were Ian Ellis, bass and lead vocals, and Harry Hughes on drums. Soon the band's name was changed to Clouds, and all of the recorded output would be under this banner. From 1969 to 71, there were a trio of albums. In recent years, there have been a couple of compilations released as well. Well, welcome, Billy.
Hi, Greg.
Thanks for joining me. Thanks for being here.
Nice to be here. Thanks for asking.
You're very welcome. Well, let's see. Going back a few years, you were born in Lanark, Scotland.
Lanark in Scotland, yes, as you can tell by the accent.
Yes, it's not as strong because I guess of your years in England, but you can still detect a little bit. Take us back to your childhood and any fond memories there.
Well, I grew up in a village that was a very small backward place. In fact, when I finally joined up with Harry and Ian, and they were told that this organist was available, and they heard I came from this place, Forth, which is a village just outside Lanark. They laughed for about 10 minutes because they called us the sheepmen because we were the barbarians up in the hills, you know. So it was that kind of place. It was totally isolated, you know. You never knew anybody from the next village. It was that sort of thing, you know. So it was very isolated.
Okay. Well, how about growing up or as a child? You remember hearing any music being played in the household?
I wasn't a music, funny that I'd say this to everybody, but I wasn't a music fan. I never was much of a listener and still not. I never was during the band days. I was a bit of an egomaniac. I was only interested in what I did.
Okay.
Of course, I picked up on what other people did, but I wasn't impressed by it. I always thought I did something better, you know. It was that was kind of how that prog thing, my part of prog, I mean, that came about. I mean, people say things like I started prog or something. That's a bit embarrassing because prog would have happened regardless of any one influence, but we were certainly part of it. Yeah. And in that particular time and place. But back in Scotland, I was in an isolated situation. My neighbor threw a piano out when I was about 8 or something.
Yeah.
And in those days, as I say, if something was free, even if you didn't want to, you took it. So the parents took it because it was free. They weren't paying for it. So they regretted that because immediately everybody was banging it, you know. Right. The rest of my brothers and sisters gave up, but I kind of persevered. And my brothers and sisters would say, "Mom, can't you tell him to pack it in?" So that was good practice for audiences later on. You just ignored all that stuff.
Right. Well, the other good part about it was it wasn't very far. It didn't take a lot to move it. It was just next door. So yeah.
That's right. It was just one of those things. And if that hadn't happened, I doubt I would have ever been involved. And I didn't know I was any good. I was playing in isolation. It was like a hobby, like when you make little dolls or you draw airplanes, or that's what it was to me. It was like something that didn't mean much. Then my friends turned around and said, they were playing a bit of guitar, and they said, "Oh, let's form a band and be rich and famous." Yeah. And I was thinking, God, what am I going to do? I didn't want to be left out. So they said to me, "What are you going to do, Wally?" Because Wally was what the name used then. When you're William in Scotland, you were Wally. W-U, like Ur Wally in the magazine.
Oh, you.
Wally. But you couldn't say that in England because when you say Wally in England, they say Wally, which has an entirely different meaning. You're a bit of a plonker there. You know? So that's why it was Billy in the end.
Yeah. Well, my dad's name was Wallace, and he went by Wally, W-A.
Wally, yeah. If you
Yeah,
can
Wally.
say it, if you can say it, that's fine. But it doesn't have the same meaning for Americans as it does
Right.
for English people. Wally is somebody who's a bit of a nerd, you know.
Okay. Well,
So
well, what
anyway,
about?
they said to me, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'll play electric organ." That's the first thing that came into my head. And they
Uh-huh.
were thinking, you could see them thinking, "What the hell's electric organ?" Because it was
Yeah.
very much guitars in those days.
Right. Well, what was your first band? Was that the Satellites?
The Satellites, yeah. My great friend to this present day, Robert Fleming, was my best friend. He played guitar. He played guitar for a living after that,
Mhm.
and he was a really good guy. But I thought I was just in the band basically because I was the friend. You know, they just let me. I was the Pete Shotton of the band.
Okay.
And,
Right.
but when we went to the first rehearsal, and they were trying to learn a song, and they were all struggling. I thought, what's going on? What's the problem? So I played it for them, and they all turned around and looked at me like, "My God, you know, as if I had horns about it." Oh, wait a minute, I must be pretty good, right? So that was the first eureka moment, you know.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I was gonna.
That set me off on the journey. It turned
Right.
out to be an unfortunate journey, really, because we didn't make it in the end, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we had got our fingers on the ledge, but that's not good enough.
Right. Right. You didn't have any production with the Satellites?
Oh no, it
Anything?
was just a local village band.
Okay.
And then I was working in this job. I was made redundant from my first job, which was a story of my life. And I liked that job as well. But in the second job, there was this fellow there called Archie Cahoon. And he
Mhm.
was a friend of Ian Ellis and Harry Hughes. They had a band called the Premiers.
Okay. Okay.
And they were saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be good if we could get an organ to make the sound a bit more full?" And Archie said, "I know where the best organist in Britain is," because Archie spoke like that, you know. And they went, "Where does this genius come from?" And then I told you that. So they said, "Fourth," and they all went, "Oh, Fourth. You're kidding, aren't you?" So they came at me and said, "Would you like to join us?" I said, "Well, no way. What do I join you for?" They were dead snooty about it, you know. So I thought,
Uh-huh.
but anyway, they talked me into coming along to the audition, and the same thing happened at the rehearsal. The guitarist Derek sat down to work out the song, and I played it all before he worked it out. And they all went, "My God, you know."
Yeah.
So I thought, take that.
There you go. There you go. Well,
That was me paying them back. But
they
anyway, when I heard them, I had no intention to join them, but when I heard them play it, I thought, "Oh, they're really good. They're miles better than we are, you know." So that's what made me join them.
Okay. Okay. Well, you must have hit it off pretty well with Ian and Harry from.
Well, as soon as I joined, within a month or so of me joining, the guitarist left, the lead guitarist left. He couldn't stand the competition, you know. He didn't
Okay.
like, guitarists never liked the organ player to play, the keyboard player to be in front of them. As Rick Wakeman says to this day, he says, before synths were invented, you couldn't get in front of guitarists. Well, that
Right.
wasn't true, because I could.
You could, yeah.
I
Yeah.
could. And they didn't like it.
Oh, I could see
So
that.
he left, and that left us down. And then the other guys left, and that was only the three of us.
The three left, yeah.
Ian was a singer. Ian Ellis was just a singer, but he picked up the bass and learned it really fast. So it was amazing. He never gets credit for that, but it was amazing.
Okay. Okay, just self-taught like that. Okay. And then Harry, where did he learn to drum, or how long had
He,
it been?
he was playing in a pipe band. Most guys at that time in Scotland who learned drums played in pipe bands.
Is that right?
I
Okay.
mean, my grandfather was a pipe major, which apparently is a really big thing. He was somebody who was the leading light of pipe playing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And his sons were pipe majors. I told that one night I was talking, I didn't know it was that important, but I was talking to a piper one night and he said, "Do you know anything about it?" I said, "Well, my grandfather was a pipe major." And he went, "What?" He was really astounded by that. So it must have been a big deal.
Must have been a big fan, impressed by that. So your dad, you said he was also your dad?
My dad wasn't musical, no.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
he's, in fact, as I say, everybody in the house was complaining. They were saying, "Can't you shut up? You know, make all that racket." That was the theme of my life. That's what the audiences did too.
So, well, so your parents, were they a little bit discouraging when they found out that you wanted
Well,
to
I
be
never got any encouragement. I mean, But I was okay that way. I was kind of a lone wolf. I was in my own zone. It
Right.
didn't worry me, criticism.
Right. But you got to be kind of thick-skinned a little bit, in order to press on.
I was I was oversensitive of anything, but I was able to shut myself away from all that when I needed to. You have to do that in the music business anyway, once you're in there, because it's pretty much, some people think you get on a stage and you're going to be idolized. No, it's like being in the stocks, where you're sitting with the tomatoes thrown at you.
They're getting
That was my analogy for it. You're in the stocks, in the market square, and everybody's going,
everybody's getting ready to throw. Well, you did, like you said, the couple other members, the guitarist left, and it was just the three of you. Who came up with the name 1, 2, 3?
I can't remember. It was just there was a band in Edinburgh called Three's a Crowd, and we liked that name. So I suspect it was something to do with that.
Yeah.
There were three guys in a three-piece band, and they weren't nothing like us, but they were doing Tamala and things. But we liked the name, Three's a Crowd, and we liked that. So 1, 2, 3. Bit simple, and it didn't have any images, but people used to say, who's 1, who's 2, who's 3?
Right.
People always make it complicated.
Yeah, they do.
I much preferred that name to Clouds. When we finally signed with Chrysalis, and Terry, the founder, who lived in America most of that time, Terry said, "Oh, I'm going to call the band Clouds." I went, "Oh no, what a terrible name."
Yeah. Didn't like it. Didn't
like it. No.
No.
And I think I was right. There's about 5 bands called Clouds, and it just muddies the waters, and it doesn't mean anything. It's too vague.
Yes, it is. Yeah, you're right. When you do a search, like you said, it brings up several different bands. It's better to have
the first ones, but that doesn't help,
Yeah, it's better to have a unique name. You're right. Well, like you said, it was revolutionary at the time, using the keyboard as the centerpiece. Talk about your playing style.
I think at the time I didn't rationalize it, but thinking about it later on, after the music was all over, I kind of realized that what I was trying to do was I was frustrated. I wanted to have the status of the guitarists.
Okay.
Most of the thing I noticed about most of the people I saw in the early days when I saw Keith Emerson playing around the clubs, used to get in there and jam and things. They all tried to play like Jimmy Smith or Jimmy McGriff, who were the heroes, the jazz organists. And I thought that was old hat. I wanted to be rock, I wanted to be bang.
Yeah.
So I don't think my style, if you listen to the playing even in the records, it doesn't sound like anybody else. It's kind of approaching it a completely one-off kind of way. Not consciously, it was just the way I saw it, And of course I had to hold the line. I couldn't play top stuff, or I had to be middly a lot of the time to hold the band, to hold the power of the band. It restricted me, really, being in a 3-piece band. I mean, Rick, for instance, playing with Yes, he had all the other guys doing all this stuff. He could decorate on top. I could never do that. I had to hold the line.
Yes, you're right. Like you said, it was a focus. Yeah, a very different type of style. And
it wasn't really my style. It was just the big thing about my playing was whatever situation I was in, I played the situation. I didn't play one way. I played whatever it was, and whatever the other musicians played, I would adapt to compensate for them or something.
Yeah. Right.
It was neurosis, really. It was a kind of neurosis. I didn't realize that, but it was. I was very neurotic. I wanted everything to be what it should be.
Yes. Well, that's part of perfectionism, I think, with musicians too.
It's also a bit neurotic. As David Palmer, who did the strings with Jethro, as David said to me, "Look, Billy, you can't be the band."
Yeah.
He said, "You're power mad." Playing everything,
Yeah. Well, a healthy ego is okay.
Well, it's a balance, isn't it? You need to listen to other people who say, "No, don't do that."
Yeah.
I was kind of in my own zone at the time.
Yeah. Well,
also, sorry, Greg. I also played. The big thing was I noticed when you had in those days it was single keyboards most of the time, right. And when you played your right hand and your left hand you couldn't play solos there because your left hand was blocking out your right hand. So a lot of the guys played one-handed, or you could even see Rick the fiddling with all the controls while they play with one hand. I never wanted to do that, so I played everything in octaves. I played the same thing with my left hand as it was with my right hand, so it made it double strong.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
my left hand was like a right hand. You know, like octaves
Right.
and harmonies and things. You know, I always
Right.
made my left hand work just as hard as my right,
That's right.
and that helped the sound.
Well, I think so. I think so. Yeah, the first, trio prog band that I ever, got into was ELP, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And I couldn't believe the sound that they could make with just three members, because it was always traditionally 4 or 5 or whatever. And
Well, when we played the Fillmore East,
yeah,
quite recently, you think that's all gone, but somebody from your country wrote something on the. They said, all I remember about Clouds was asking, where's the guitars?
right.
This was the Fillmore East in 1970, you know?
Right. I mean, it's just what you're used to.
Yeah, no, that's nothing, is it? I mean, bands all the time with 3, but.
Right.
Well, when Keith Emerson saw me, he was in a 4-piece band with a guitar, you know?
Uh-huh.
They thought,
Nice.
oh, get rid of the guitarist.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, you guys felt a move to London might enhance your visibility and potential success, right? So you.
Well, what kind of happened was we knew the music was good and different. We knew we'd struck on something, accidentally almost. But the audience reactions, half the audience hated us and half the audience loved us. The musicians loved us. And we thought we'd go to London, they're a lot more hip, but actually it was the same. When the marquee was like a punk gig, people fighting each other, saying, no, they're rubbish, no, they're great, That we made a real fuss, but it wasn't necessarily just an adoration. It was half and half.
Half and half. Yeah.
It was too early. It was 2 years before there was such a thing as prog.
See, that's true. Yeah, you were at the forefront. Well, yeah, and you can't please everybody. I mean, you got to please yourself first.
Well, when you're young like that,
right.
You knowing what I know now, you think, why did we bother? But when you're young like that, you think they're all wrong, and you're quite happy to make think they're stupid or whatever. Just not realizing you're stupid yourself.
Right. A lot of that comes with maturing too. Well, talk about how you did secure the residency at the Marquee Club. How did you guys?
This guy Archie, I mean, I keep mentioning him because he was one of those guys that could talk his way into anything. Mm-hmm. It was very difficult. The Marquee was the most important club in the country. Mm-hmm. And it was very difficult even to get an audition there, never mind getting a gig there. But Archie was brilliant at that stuff. He just walked in and said, look, John, I've got this band, the best band you've ever heard. And for one reason or another, John G., who was the manager, gave us an audition. Mm-hmm. And he listened to half a number and walked away. And Archie ran after him and says, what's wrong? He says, it's the best band I've ever heard. And he gave us a Saturday night residency. We never did any support spots, which normally you built your way up. We went straight into a Saturday night residence. Because John thought, after he retired, John was a bit of a musical snob. But when he retired, he was interviewed by one of the broadcasters here, Gloria Hannaford, who's a kind of famous, on daytime TV. And she said, you've had the Rolling Stones at the club, you've had the Who. Who was the best band that ever played there? And he said, a Scottish band called Clouds. You could see her face going, who the hell's that? But that's what he said, yeah. He still thought that right to the end.
Yeah, well, he had heard enough and he was impressed. Well, talk about how you met David Jones, aka Bowie. And
we before all the 1, 2, 3 thing, when we were the Premiers, we did a gig in Dundee, north of Scotland, and with Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, somebody from there with the Pash. I'll never get over you. Yeah. And another band in the bill was Dave Jones and the Lower Third or something,
Right.
And he came up to me and he said, I haven't seen a keyboard player play that way before, because I was standing up and doing all that, throwing it over and all that. And I thought, well, he was playing a saxophone, and I thought, well, he's got a bit of style, this guy. And we sort of got on quite well. And I said, oh, we're coming to London. He said, well, we'll get together when you come down. But then we just probably forgot about each other because it was maybe 9 months or so later before we came down.
Mhm.
But Ian, our bass player, when we became 123, we were picking up songs, trying to do unusual songs. Ian heard David's song on the radio, I Dig Everything. So that was one of the ones we did.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when we were in London at the Marquee, David heard about it and came to the Marquee. And that was when we renewed our acquaintance, you know.
Is that right? Well, he became a real fan, a real champion.
He followed us around, carried the gear in, you know.
Wow.
I introduced him to Jimi Hendrix, you know that story. That's one of my claims to fame.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
people make it's a big mythic thing, you know, but actually it's just like, hello, how are you? Oh, Jimmy, this is David. Oh, fair enough. That was it. But it sounds better as a myth than a reality.
Than what actually happened.
Just two guys in the room, isn't it?
Right.
The irony for me was that none of us realized the significance because David was just a guy at that time. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was years before he became famous. So Jimmy died not knowing he'd been talking to a superstar.
Right. That's very true. Wow. Did you early on though? Could you see the seeds of Bowie, what he would possibly become, or
I
not?
suppose it sounds terrible, but all of us, him and me and people like us, there was loads of us, we all thought we were going to be the ones, you know. I thought I was going to be the famous one. I like David, he's very intelligent, very clever, very sharp, a bright spark, as I call him. But I thought he was a bit quirky to be ever. I've never, even to this day, I've never thought his songs were the real deal. I thought what he did was brilliant, was he realized the situation he had and made the most of it. He was very clever, very artistic, very clever. And I wasn't surprised in a way when he made it, but to me, it wasn't a musical thing so much. It was more that artistic thing and doing something different and seizing the chance. When he got that piece of brilliant luck on Top of the Pops, I mean, he wasn't supposed to do that show, was he? He stood in for somebody else.
Yeah.
And but he seized that moment. He really made it something. And everybody looked, they weren't listening to the music. They just looked, this guy with the ginger hair and the sparkly suit and his arm around Mick, oh my God, you know, bang.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think another glam rocker, Mark Bolan, had that same effect when people first saw him.
Well, that story with Mark, where apparently his girlfriend, he was going on Top of the Pops and his girlfriend just drew some silver glitter or glittery stuff on his face and put some makeup on him, and everybody went, wow.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of one of those accidental things, you know. When the last time I saw David, which was at a couple of years before he died, there was an exhibition in London, and I didn't know he was there. The guy, I was asked to go there and go early for a drink, and when I turned up, he was there. And I said to him, he was with a lot of people, so I couldn't talk properly. But the first thing I said to him was, it should have been the other way around. He went, hello, Billy. I went, it should have been the other way around. He laughed. All the others, I think, what does he mean? But that was our little private thing, you know. I was mean, and it should have been me, not you.
Yeah.
And he knew that.
Right.
Because that's what we used to talk. What are we going to do when we're famous, you know?
Yeah.
Little did I'm thinking it's going to be me. He's thinking it's going to be him. Turns out he's right.
You had stars in your eyes. Yeah. Exactly.
Most people don't make it. That big group of people, they all were talented, but only one or two made it. And it wasn't necessarily the best people that made it. It was just that luck. It was just that right place, right time.
A lot of luck in the timing, what you said, and you know.
Not meant to be, you know. It's like a big, you know, the lottery thing. The big hand comes down and says, "Not you."
Not me every time. Not me. Yeah, exactly. We'll talk about how you came to sign with Brian Epstein and NIMS in EMS. NIMS.
Yes, well, that stuff at the Marquee was so. I mean, right from the very first gig, it was mayhem.
Yeah.
Roger, I always remember Roger Chapman, who was with a band called Family.
Yeah.
And Roger came straight into the dressing room at the break, not even at the end. He came in at the break and he went, guys, that's great stuff, but you'll never get away with it. That's what he said. And he was right, as it turns out. We all laughed. But he was actually right, because it was too early. It was too early for that stuff. If you listen to Our America, that yes, copied, by the way. And John says that, to be fair. John actually says that. He got it from us. But you can hear it anyway if you listen to it. we were doing that. Paul Simon hadn't even got it in his record. We picked it up in a demo. So we were doing things like that. We weren't doing ordinary songs, but we were changing them beyond all recognition, stopping and starting. And people wanted to dance and go, what the hell is this? Nowadays, it's normal, isn't it, prog? Well,
yeah, right, right. Yeah. Years later, people kind of
yeah.
switched.
So people tended to hear about the kerfuffle, the chaos, and Brian Epstein and Robert Stigwood came down, you know.
Uh-huh.
And he went marvelous with a limp handshake.
Yeah.
And said, I'd like to sign you guys. We were, oh yeah, whatever. We were, you know, when you're young like that, you're blasé, you think you're not kind of wow.
Uh-huh.
Like when the guy said, where are we next week? He said, oh, you're at the Albert Hall. We said, oh, okay. Now you go, what? That's what youth is, you know, you're very kind of, all right, fair enough.
Well, you did have a lot of confidence, though. I mean, you
had to have. You were faced with a lot of flack, you know.
Right. Well, unfortunately, the relationship with Brian Epstein was short-lived.
He died within a few. He signed us in April and died in August.
Yeah, the timing of that was.
Didn't do us any favors, did it? Because he saw something in us.
Right.
Just like he saw in the Beatles, he saw something in us. He put us in those suits with cravats, and we were going, oh, bloody suits, well, you know. And he said, sophisticated music must have sophisticated attire. And we thought, what's he on about? You know, we were kind of guys from the woods. But he saw something. He put us on that gig with Hendrix, probably for that reason, you know.
Uh-huh. Wow, just think if the timing had been different.
Yeah.
Somehow he'd met.
Stigwood didn't understand us. He sent us on a tour with jugglers and magicians, sent us on a cabaret tour, because we didn't sound like the other bands, you know. We sounded quite radically different. That band would still sound radically different now, even with prog. Prog took a lot of what we did. They tried to copy us, but they didn't pick up what we actually did. There was a different. We were very much related to songs and stuff. Prog was about being clever musically. Yes, we were clever musically, but the song came first.
Right. That was the focus. Well, like you said, Robert Stigwood dropped the ball.
He did really, and it didn't do us any favors. So what happened was he signed the Bee Gees right at the moment we were left with him. He signed the Bee Gees, and we were pally with them. We used to go to the clubs together and all that. And then they suddenly became big, you know. So that was us in the back foot. Same thing happened at Chrysalis with Jethro Tull.
Jethro Tull, yeah. You hear about that. I hear about that in these interviews too, that there's a bigger band or one that they put more focus and more time behind and promotion, and then the others kind of fall by the wayside. They don't.
I was mad at Terry for a long time, but look, in hindsight, what else could he do? They were a small agency, and he had a band that was taking over, that was really taking off. That was his chance to become a multimillionaire and live as he does in the Virgin Islands and all that stuff. I mean, I knew him, he had a bed set in Shepherd's Bush, you know. So what was he going to do? I mean, he had no guarantees with us. I mean, when he talks about us today, he just says it didn't gel for them. It's a bit disingenuous, because if your manager isn't around,
right?
I don't know what you. If you look at the reviews from our first American tour, we took the place by storm. We went down an absolute storm everywhere. We often were down bigger. When we played the Aragon Ballroom in Chicago with Jethro Tull, Shanna Na, Steve Miller, we got the headline for Billboard. They said this band's going to be a giant, but they never picked. The record didn't come out till way after that. We lost the momentum.
We'll talk about that. I'll jump up to that. What are your memories of that tour, your first tour in America?
It was just suddenly playing to thousands of people and wild receptions. And the thing that really I remember the most was when you played in the UK, like when we did the Albert Hall, it was Jethro Tull and 10 Years After. They were the big bands. We were kind of the support bands, you know? And that's the way people viewed it. They didn't really listen to you. They thought, well, we want them to get off the stage so our guys can come on, you know?
Right.
America at that time was totally different to that. If you delivered, they were for you. The
Yeah.
audiences were great. They were so open-minded, and we could do that. We were good live, so we got the receptions, and often more so than the big guys. And that was down to the American people. They were fantastic. Yeah.
So you have fond memories of that. And then you toured again. How many times did you tour the U.S.?
We toured the US twice.
Okay.
The second time wasn't anywhere as good because what happened was in the first tour, Chrysalis's agent was Premier Talents. Ironic name, Premier Talents. And they John Anthony, I think it was. Oh, I can't remember his name. D. Anthony. And he'd been running all the tours for them, and they suddenly decided we want to do it ourselves. So D. Anthony slapped a writ on them, and there'd all this stuff going on. So a lot of the gigs were cancelled, and there was all this chaos going on. And we were in New York at the Chrysalis offices, and Terry wasn't there. It was his underling. Can't remember his name now. But anyway, I was pretty much doing my nut and shouting and swearing and getting out of my box. And Harry Hughes was saying, "Calm down, Billy, calm down." I said, "You don't realize that, about our lives."
Yeah.
And I was right. I
Yeah.
was right.
Yeah.
I was right. The moment had gone.
Right.
It just
Yeah.
went.
Right.
People
Yeah.
forgot about us completely.
Oh, isn't that
We'd been up there. We felt like we made it, really.
Mhm.
And then, bang. That's why I couldn't go on.
Yeah.
I dropped out,
Yeah.
I thought,
Well-
no, I can't live my life defined by this. But it's turned out it has been defined. Look at this. I do lots of this stuff, but it doesn't give me, like people say sometimes, you don't seem, you should be, aren't you pleased it all came out again? So, well, it's like being proved that you got cheated out of something.
Right. Well, like I said, I mean, the internet has been a big proponent of that, rediscovering a lot of bands, and myself, I know that, and connecting with younger, fans and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been a good deal, and the good music is gonna last. It's there, and it's gonna be rediscovered and found out. People are gonna.
We never managed to really reach, because my real forte was taking other people's songs and doing something completely different, like I did with America and David's song and stuff. That was my forte. And Terry said, you're going to have to dump all that stuff because the musicians love you, but they're not going to buy your records. They're just going to steal your ideas.
Right.
So we had to dump all that. He says, "Have you got any songs of your own?" I says, "Well, I've written about 1,000 songs." He went, "Really?" And I played them to him, and he loved them even more in the band. But the trouble was, how could you put the two together? I had written the songs. How could I rewrite them in that style? That was the problem. And Terry says that today. He says, if you could have married those songs with that band,
Mhm.
but it was difficult. And each album, on Watercolor Days, you can hear me trying to get there.
Yeah.
Another
Yeah.
2 albums we'd have got there, but you don't get that time,
You don't. Well, let's go back to Scrapbook. What do you remember from the studio recordings?
Most of the time I was playing guitar.
Okay.
I wasn't the greatest guitarist in the world, but I'd written the songs, so I was playing bits of guitar and we were just like babes in the wood. I said how live we were really good. We had a tough, much more than English guys, we had a tough kind of situation. You have people throwing bricks at us and all sorts. That makes you musically tough.
Yeah.
We were miles more tough than most bands, musically tough than bands of that time. But in the studio, we were babes in the wood. They were all used to studios. We knew nothing about them. So we were pretty much, just sitting there and people saying, do this, do that. I mean, it just never, we had no grip of anything. We were just told what to do, basically. We played my songs,
Mhm.
and sometimes it would sound, they sound pretty good on Scrapbook, but it's nothing like Clouds. It's nothing like the band.
No.
It is now and again, Carpenter, Waiter was a bit like 1, 2, 3-ish, with all the changes.
Yeah.
And there was David Palmer, who was doing the orchestration. He said to, because Chrysalis at that, well, they weren't even Chrysalis at the time, I think, were they? I think it was just Ellis Wright, or it might have been Chrysalis, but early days. Terry showed me that butterfly. Still remember that. But David Palmer said to Terry, we don't have much time with the orchestra, so I'd rather rather than the guys playing, I'd rather have the orchestra drummer, the orchestra keyboard player, the orchestra bass player. So Terry came to us and told us what David said. We went, no way, you know, no, we're not the love affair. We're not playing on our record. We were quite insulted. So anyway, we stuck for that. And David was right in a way because the continuity would be good. We only got 2 takes, but it was still, I'm still not sorry because you want to play on your own record. And it was a great experience in the middle of the orchestra because it was live. The orchestra wasn't dubbed, it was there. It was the middle of the orchestra playing and sort of leading the charge. That was a good memory.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned playing with 10 Years After. How was working with Alvin Lee?
I was a big friend of Alvin's. We used to hang out together. He said that just before he died, he did an interview in the Record Collector magazine down here. And the guy who did it said to him, I'm in touch with Billy. And he says, I'll give him my email because we used to be pals. We used to hang about and play songs to each other and all that. But he died before I could get in touch with him. So that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
He was a good guy, Alvin. I liked Alvin.
Yeah, he seemed to be. I mean, from what I've heard and read, he seemed to be really good.
Don't ask him to play more than 3 chords, but he's good. I mean, on our records, early one, the sort of ballady thing called I'll Go Girl. You can hear him playing guitar on it.
Okay.
And it's a bit of a mess, you know. And when we asked him about it, he says, every time I went to play something, a chord changed.
That's funny.
He had a great technique, but 3 chords was his forte, you know.
Yeah, he couldn't go more than 3. That's funny. Well, off that album, my favorite track is the title track, Scrapbook. I like everything. Yeah, I like everything. Yeah, I like the flute and the dual vocals as well. I like on that.
Oh, I mean, that's Ian that's singing. I mean, the critics liked that song, and a singer called Clodagh Rogers, who was famous at that time, she recorded it.
Yeah, exactly. I know who you're talking about. Well, saw something over there. Also like Ladies and Gentlemen. That's another one.
Yeah, that was the kind of songs I was writing, but you can hear it's nothing like the band, you know.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, I had it here now.
Oh, all right. Oh, just the album she actually was on with our song was Midnight Clodagh.
Okay.
So that's probably a compilation thing as well, yeah.
I had that available. Well, and then I think the single "Make No Bones About It." That's a nice track.
There's a story about that one too. I used to, when we were at one point, we were in Birmingham for 2 or 3 months playing, and the guys in Birmingham were great. I was really pally with a guy called Jeff Lynne. Jeff was in a band called the Idle Race at that time.
Yeah.
And he said to me, and I can't do the Brum accent, but so I said, "Oh, I like that. Make no bones about it. The bit where you go, don't da 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 bit of live, you know." And he used it, didn't he? And this is one of the songs. Was it "Turn to Stone"? I turn to stone.
Yeah. I hear
Jeff,
that.
cough up.
Yeah.
And Roger, who was the drummer of the Idle Race, I always remember him saying to me, "Oh, our kid, you know, because the very Brum accent, our kid, this is the move I've asked him to, the try to turn his head off and all this and that. It says, I hope he stays with us." And I was thinking to myself, he's mad if he does. Yeah. Jeff wasn't stupid, you know, as we've seen.
No. He had his sights.
Brilliant recordings. I went to the studio in those days. I must admit, I was kind of stupid again because I thought he'll never make it in a million years. I didn't think his songs were good enough. They were all that. The songs that he does now have got the same chords, you know, like he's got D minor, E minor, D minor. He loves that sequence. It comes into almost every song he does. But there's no hook or catch, musically or lyrically in those days. And I thought, no, not really. I was amazed when he suddenly found the hook. But I'll tell you what, if you listen to everything he does, it's come from somewhere else. Don't bring me down, for goodness sake. What about the pretty things? Don't bring me down.
Oh, and heavily
dead on.
Heavily influenced by the Beatles. Heavily.
Oh yeah, it's like an aspect of the Beatles, like a lot of people have done. Police doing fix a hole where the rain comes in.
Right.
People do that in aspects.
Yeah, they were, yeah, ELO was probably bigger here in the States than over there. I think real,
Yeah,
real,
it was his recordings. He'd spend a year doing a recording and perfectionist, you know.
right, right.
Yeah, they used to call me One Take Ritchie because I got fed up with the song after a couple of run throughs.
Yeah, well, he and Bob Dylan are the only two remaining members of Traveling Wilburys.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was a good guy. He probably still, I haven't seen him since those days, but he was good. He was a nice guy, and he seems like he still is, you know, from what I can see.
yeah. Well, moving up to 1970s, Up Above Our Heads, I like In the Mine. That, that's
I'm
my
glad you said that. I'm glad you
yeah,
said that, Greg, because it's a genuine song. And that's
yeah,
what that album lacked. It lacked
right,
songs. It was all,
right,
we were so pissed off at Scrapbook being not representative of the band in much of a
right,
way. We were determined the second album would show how we could play. But in doing that, we lost the songs. It was all riffy stuff and corny songs. And apart from like that one,
yeah,
that was a good song.
yeah, yeah.
Even Ian Anderson was in the studio with us. They said, "Oh, I like that one." He loved
Oh, yeah,
the middle with the
yeah,
da, 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 da.
right. That's the part I like too as well. Here's what here's how I got into your music. Actually, was from this BGO
Yeah,
compilation. Whoa,
yeah,
yeah, I have to do it backwards in the way I want to. There we go. Yeah, so it's got all three albums on there and some extra tracks
yes.
and everything. So, yep. Um, now moving to Watercolor Days. Uh, Mind of a Child is a really track I go back to, and Leaving. Like both of
Even
those.
again, we were kind of thinking, we were trying out songs, and I thought, well, that's a bit different. That one. It's again, it's not a Cloud song. It's just my song,
Yeah,
and I stuck it on there. I couldn't sing it as well as I would have liked to. I wasn't a singer, you know.
yeah.
Um, my favorites, the best song I think we did for Clouds, the best compromise between my songwriting and the band was Watercolor Days.
Okay. Yeah.
The intro and the arrangement and the song itself. There's still things I regret about it. The chorus wasn't as good as the verse, and that's never a good thing.
Right. Right. Well, I think off of that release, I mentioned that there were some, extra tracks.
Oh,
I
the ones
like
the ones that we didn't get out.
yeah, the ones that did. Why Is There No Magic? That's probably my second favorite track.
Should have been a
And
Christmas hit, that one.
yeah,
Should have been
and
a Christmas hit.
was it a demo or what was?
It was meant to be a release, but it never got there.
Huh. Okay.
It
Yeah.
was. I thought it was a good pop song, for want of a better word, and
Right.
it was. I was telling the truth in it. I was
Uh-huh.
actually a lot of my songs. I'm actually saying what I feel. You know, they're not just made up. Some of them are, but a lot of them aren't made up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they got to come from you and your heart and your spirit and everything.
The guy who played guitar on that was Steve Gold. You know, who was in what's that band? Sympathy is all you need, my friend.
Rare Bird.
That's it. Yeah.
Rare
That's who
Bird. Yeah.
plays guitar on that.
Right. You're right. Yeah. I like their stuff. I like Rare Bird. Yeah. Yeah. I got
Yeah.
a couple of their
Yeah, they were
albums.
good. Friend of mine, John Anthony, another John Anthony was he was a DJ in one of the clubs we played. Great fan. I'm still in touch with him today. He produced Genesis and Rare Bird and Ace and all those people.
Yeah.
John was a bit of a character.
Well, like we talked about, referred to earlier, unfortunately, Terry Ellis was preoccupied with Jethro Tull.
What made it really unfortunate, Greg, is that Terry loved us.
Yeah.
And that was a problem because he wouldn't delegate to anybody else, even though he couldn't be two places at once. So it meant we got nobody. But it wasn't because he disregarded us like Stigwood did. It was because he loved us and he was jealous of anybody else having a foothold with us.
Yeah.
So that kind of was a double whammy for us, really. He loved us, but what good is that if he's can't, do the job?
Yeah, man.
He made himself. Chrysalis became one of the biggest labels in the world and tremendously successful. And Terry and Chris are both filthy rich and all that. So you could say he was right, but we suffered in that process, definitely.
Yeah. Would you say he was a bit of a control freak?
Oh, he definitely was. I think he had to be. I mean, Terry was I was hurt because Terry was a friend of mine, a friend. I regarded him as a friend as well as a manager.
Right.
We used to meet up and talk, and not just about the band, you know. So I felt a bit betrayed, really.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was
Well,
young. Couldn't see both sides at the time.
yeah. Well, so would you say the writing was kind of on the wall at that point?
After the watercolor days thing, things just seemed to be slipping from our grasp. You know, we went to Montreux and the festival. We did the festival there with a band called Stone the Crows, Maggie Bell and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
And we got stuck in Geneva because the flights were grounded, and we had to get a train back. And the train had no heating on it, and it was like, what was it, 18 hours on the train or 20 hours on the train with no heating. And we're all jumping up and down the seats, and somehow the whole atmosphere of everything seemed to go that way. You know, it's like everything's going your way, and then suddenly it's not. And for the rest of that was about January 1971. And for the rest of the year, we were just treading. We fell out with Christmas. Terry said to me, "I want you to leave the band, and I want you to just publish and do your own records." And I said, "No way." He says, "We'll give you your own publishing company." And I went, "No, forget it." And there was a room full of people. Terry felt a bit embarrassed that I was kind of putting him down. So we just kind of, that was it then.
Yeah.
That was it, finished with Christmas.
Well, what did the Harry and Ian do after that? They moved on and stayed with music, didn't they?
Harry, both of them stayed in a bit. I later that year, I was thinking about it. All the things, we were back to being just a band doing gigs and no records, and I thought, I can't live my life defined by this, you know.
Right.
Little did I know it would be defined by that anyway, but I thought I've got to try and get out of it. And I thought, well, if every time we sat down and talked about it, we just went round in circles, and you know, you stayed on a bit longer. So I thought the only way out of this is to blow it all up. So I was in a gig one night in Stoke-on-Trent, and in the middle of the gig, I kicked everything off the stage. I kicked my keyboards off the stage, jumped off the stage, walked out the hall, caught a train back to London. I didn't see Harry and Ian for 10 years. That was the end for me. That was how Klaus finished.
Yeah.
I thought it's the only way to do it.
Right, right. Yeah, there was a lot of emotion there for sure. And,
well, you know, I look back and I probably, in hindsight, I thought I would go and get my life back again, you know, one I had before the band. But it just never proved possible. I mean, I did okay materially and all that. I had many adventures in those realms, but I never found anything else. And if I'd have known it would define me so much, like all this stuff, you know, the things coming out again and all that, I probably should have, in hindsight, I probably should have stayed in the music business a bit longer and tried to do something. That thing that Terry offered me probably would have been a good thing to do. I just at the time was too pig-headed. When they interviewed Terry a few years back about us, I think that Mojo article, and he said, I would say that Billy Ritchie was very disillusioned and probably self-destructive. Because I was kind of in his face, you
know. Well, but Harry and Ian did go on.
Oh yeah, sorry, I must have tried that. Harry and Ian. Harry carried on for a while. The Marquis got Harry to form a band called Mahatma Kane Jeeves, and then eventually just Mahatma. But they didn't quite make it. They were offered that song "You to Be Our Everything," and they turned it down. And the real thing took it and made it. Okay. So that's kind of the way it works sometimes. Yeah. Ian, after that, Harry dropped out. After about 7 or 8 years, Harry dropped out of the music business, went back, took a degree, became a hygienist, an occupational hygienist. Did really well. Ian is still in the music business now. He stayed in it the whole time. Like, I didn't want to. It's that atypical thing, you know, this is what I do. I'm going to carry on with long hair and baldy top and fat, be interviewed, being as wide as the screen and all that, you know. And that's not me. But Ian loves that gypsy life, you know. He's played with, there was one night There's one that he said to me, "Did you see me on television?" He phoned me up and said, "Did you see me on television last night?" I said, "No." He says, "It was Cue the Music. I was with Steve Hackett, Steve Hackett from Genesis. He was in his band." I says, "Oh, I saw it when it came on. I turned it off. I didn't know it was you." So he played with him. He played with Pete Townshend's band. He was in Pete Townshend's band. He was Deep End,
Okay.
with Gilmore from Pink Floyd and all that. He was in, at the moment, the last I heard of him, he's playing with Stan Webb from Chicken Shack,
Chicken Shack, yeah, yep.
who
Wow.
Christine Perfect was originally.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sad about her passing.
Yeah, I remember her on the road with Chicken Shack,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't think she was much of a piano player, but she's a nice girl.
right.
I was like that in those days. It was always, I used to say, when in those very early days, the very early 1, 2, 3 days, if there was an organist down the front, I used to say, "Watch this." Think of it now.
Right.
Think about it now. You go, "Oh no." It's just a
Right.
useful thing,
Well, I liked her when she was with the earlier Fleetwood Mac. I kind of
Yeah.
lost interest when they sold out.
The blues one, yeah.
Yeah. After Peter Green, I guess, and
Yeah.
that interim period there. But that's some of their best material. I like that. Well, so what did you go ahead and fill in the blanks? What did you do? You said after Clouds.
I went and got a job driving a van because I didn't want to go back to offices and all that after being so free. And I
Yeah.
had several jobs and I kept falling out with bosses and things. I wasn't very good at being told what to do, never have been. They used to say, "Why don't you go and stuff yourself," or whatever, Didn't go down too well with bosses. They like to tell you what to do. Eventually, I started doing a property thing. I had about 10 properties and rent, did all that stuff for a while.
Real
It was pretty
estate.
successful. And then I got bored with that. And then I got divorced and stuff. Went through all the stuff that the rest of us do,
Mm-hmm.
Became poor again, went bankrupt. Then I've always done all right financially, funny enough. For somebody that didn't care about money in those early days, I've always done all right that way. I've survived, but the thing I miss always is something to be defined by, something that can mean something.
Right.
So it was really weird for me when all this stuff came out again, because don't forget, it was 20 years after all that stuff, me walking out, nothing, the band vanished from history.
Right.
20 years later, there's suddenly big articles and people phoning me up and saying, and David Bowie saying things about us, They always think when somebody famous says something, that must mean more somehow. It's just a opinion,
Right.
If he's famous, they think, "Oh, that must be true then." It's like you two, like Bono talking to the United Nations. Wait a minute, aren't you just a singer?
Yeah, exactly. Well, what was one of your first contacts of people do you remember that talked about the resurgence of interest, or that got in contact with you about?
Well, I suppose after the Mojo thing, there was quite a lot of that. Terry spoke to me. Terry phoned me up, spoke to me because he had got my number through the record company. Asked me what I was doing. I said this and that. I was a bit funny with him. He said, "What are you doing, Billy?" I said, "Oh, this and that." He said, "Where are you living?" I said, "Here and there." It was all like that, It was being very vague.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, we'll get together when we come back to London," but we never did.
Yeah.
I still was at that time kind of resentful. But I can see now that what choice did he have, really? I mean, he couldn't pass up the chance of that success. If he'd have spent his time with us in City Jethro, would the business have thrived? Probably not.
Yeah.
I wasn't understanding about that. It took me a long time to see that point of view. Because it was us that lost out. It wasn't Jethro.
See.
Ian Anderson tells me, even recently, he said we didn't want to sign with Terry because he had you. That was his big thing, us. And he thought, well, if we go with him, we won't get looked after. Turned out it was the other way around.
Right. It's a shame because I've talked about this with some other interviewees, and the same kind of scenario. focusing, like I said earlier, on one artist. It's a shame that they couldn't have put equal effort, or like you said, had a somebody working with Terry
He
to
needed
manage.
to delegate and he couldn't do it
Yeah,
because he
right,
was too proud. And he
right.
doesn't like to talk about us because we were about the only failure he ever had.
Yeah,
And it wasn't really a failure. It was really because we were left in a vacuum, We, I
right.
mean, that if you'd have seen us on that first American tour, you would have that's what Billboard said. This band's going to be a giant. No, they're going to be a pygmy.
Well, it's kind of come around, like you said, like a little bit full circle. I mean, in a way, with all the resurgence and interest and
Yeah, but you still get people arguing. I mean, a lot of the prog people are very. I'm generalizing, not everybody, but they're very resistant to the idea that any of their heroes took anything from us. I mean, they just because they like to think they did it all,
Yeah,
and it's just not true. We all do that anyway. But John Anderson's about the only one that's came out and said we took America from Clouds. We took America from 1, 2, 3, and we, that there were. He calls us to this day. Somebody told me. I said something in one of the interviews that John Anderson said is we're his favorite band, and somebody wrote in and said I saw him last week and he still said that. He still said, anybody remember Clouds? He said that. So our favorite band, my favorite band. He said. So that was generous, but he was careful not to say it in print.
exactly. Yeah.
Spoil the illusions,
Yeah, right. Then he can deny it later. Well, we'll talk about.
Well, it's easy to be generous when you've got all the goodies,
Exactly.
People say to me, about this stuff, about the interviews and the little bits of praise and all that. And I say, well, I'd rather have the royalties,
Yeah. I hear that. Yeah. But it must be nice to you get emails and people on Facebook and whatnot commenting, how they like
mixed emotions, really, mixed emotions. I always feel impelled to defend it. That's what I feel more than anything. I feel I've got to speak out and defend myself and defend what we did. Because I know the people that were there know it's true that we were way ahead of the curve, way ahead. Right. But at the same time, I get uncomfortable when people say things like they say the godfather of prog. I mean,
don't go there.
It's not true because prog would have happened anyway. If we'd never appeared on the marquee, prog would have happened anyway in some form. There were so many strands. It's just that we were one of the we were the earliest maybe to play it, play that kind of thing. As I say, if you had 1, 2, 3 now, that America's only one aspect. There's very few recordings. Don't think there's any of us. If 1, 2, 3 had recorded, you would hear it would still sound pretty weird. It was much more bluesy, jazzy, much more improvising vocals and much more about melody. More like King Crimson was the closest thing I ever heard to 1, 2, 3.
Okay,
because it was still melodic. Greg was there. Greg, good melodies, It was melodic and it was clever, but it was clever within a framework.
Yeah.
That would have been a great band, but they couldn't hold it together. One album.
Yeah.
It really annoys me when they talk about King Crimson. So I like that album. There's no such band. The band broke up after 6 months.
Yeah.
There's no such band. Ian, Jethro Tull. There is no Jethro Tull. I say that to Ian. I'm not talking behind his back. When the 4 guys that I knew as Jethro, they started, Mick was out, then Glenn was out, then Clive was out. It was never going to be the same. You can't just stick somebody in and get chemistry. Right. Ian's such a control freak. He's a really brilliant guy. He's also, what's unusual is he's a brilliant businessman. That's very unusual.
Very unusual.
But he's over-controlled. Like when he got Martin, when Mick left and he got Martin, Martin's very good technically. But if Ian says, look, Martin, play these notes, you wouldn't get Mick to do that. See, they lost something when they lost Mick.
Okay.
And that continued. You got people that would do Ian's every whim. There is no Jethro Tull. It's Ian with paid musicians, which also means he keeps all the money, by the way. That's what I said to Glenn and them. Why didn't you were equal? You can't be sacked from your own band.
Right.
But he never answered me. I would, if I'd have been in their position, I would have said, okay, I'll leave, but I want a quarter share of all future earnings. They never did. Glenn said to me, Glenn died quite young, quite a while ago, and we were in touch just before then because he got in touch with me because he knew I knew Bruce Thomas, who played with the Attractions, Elvis Costello and the Attractions.
Yeah.
Bruce is a friend of mine. Bruce. So when people ask Bruce about prog, he says, "Don't talk to me about prog. Go and look up Clouds." So they were the ones that started it and got robbed and all that. But Glenn got in touch with me. He says, "Can you put me in touch with Bruce Thomas, my favorite bass player?"
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking and all that stuff. And I said, how are you going with the Jethro thing? He says, "Well, I just got my royalties the other day." He says, "If I put 20 quid to them, I can take the wife for a curry."
Okay. There you go. Right.
That's somebody who's been there as well.
Yeah.
So Ian was crafty. I like Ian. I got on well with him, but I've no illusions about him. People that work with him don't like him very much. Johnny Burns calls him a word that begins with C.
Yeah. Well, I've heard this too, that I don't remember what band was supporting him on a U.S. tour. It was an American band, and supposed to be. And he said, no. He said, absolutely not. We're not going to tour. I can't remember the band. He said, we're not going to tour if this band is supporting us. So he was, I mean, it wasn't an anti-American thing. It was just, I can't remember.
Ian is somebody who wants to control every aspect of what goes on.
Yeah.
And he's very, very, very clever. Well, I was saying that about me earlier, wasn't it? The downside of that is you don't get any input.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why Ian and I got on. We're both like that.
All right. Yeah. Well, how about talk about one of the strangest places that you were when you heard a 1, 2, 3 or a Clouds song? Can you remember?
I think the strangest thing. Well, I was going to talk about Clouds thing actually, but no, the 1, 2, 3 thing. Well, there was nothing of 1, 2, 3. We used to be some tapes kicking around of us playing, and I never paid attention to them because we were in that zone, Like when they put a life-size picture of us wrapped around a pillar in the marquee, we never even took a photo of it. It was like, yeah, whatever. The Irishman walking through the streets of London paved with gold sees a fiver, says, "I'll start tomorrow,"
Yeah.
We had that mindset. We just thought everything was coming our way. Brian Epstein saying, "Yeah, so he should," Such arrogance and stupidity. But the 1, 2, 3, I believe it was one of the finest bands.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that. It was so unusual. It wasn't, yes, the playing was clever and all that, but it was the structure of it all.
Yeah.
You should have seen the people's faces, the musicians. They were like, shock, it was absolutely, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed shocking them.
Yeah.
I always remember, it sounds like a nothing story, but we were at the marquee in those early days during the residency, and standing at the front watching us was a band called the Marmalade.
Yes, the Marmalade.
Marmalade,
Right.
They're a very good band, but they got a bit lumped with doing pop stuff.
Yeah.
They were standing there. They're standing there watching us.
I have a upcoming interview with Alan Whitehead.
Oh yes, the drummer. Yeah.
He's in Thailand. Yeah. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's going to be a strange. I'm going to have to get up really early because it's like 12 hours difference. It's really so.
Yeah, that's the problem with dealing with us foreigners.
Well, yours is only 6. It's not that big of a deal. But
Alan. Yeah, I remember Alan. Well, they were standing in the front watching us at the marquee in those 1, 2, 3 early days, and they were standing like this.
Yeah.
And Dean Ford spoke to me. He says, "Where do you guys come from?" As if we were sort of Martians or something. We were going, yes. Of course, actually, we knew them. We'd played with them, and they didn't remember us because we looked different. We'd played with them. We were just a little band that paid no attention to the premiers, But this was like payback time.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the thing I was going to ask you too. Is you enjoyed playing live, right? Did you prefer that over composing and writing material?
No. Me personally, I always thought I'd end up just writing songs and stuff. That was always I wasn't a natural touring person. Ian Ellis. He's still there, as I say. He loves that life. playing with loads of different people, earning no money. You get very little money being a bit player, as Ian Anderson knows. Ask the guys from Jethro what they get.
Yeah, right.
Stay in the cheap ends. He doesn't let them have the mini bar or any of that. He's a tight writer.
Right.
I mean, quite right, really, but that's Ian. I mean, we when we were on those tours, we were big limousines and staying in the Hiltons, and when we were in Delhi, we stayed in the Hyatt and all that stuff. Little did we know that we were paying for it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I should have stayed in a B&B and kept some money.
Right. Looking back on it, hindsight. That's funny. Well, can you think of anything? What do you keeps you busy these days? What do you do?
Sorry.
What interest keep you busy these days? What do you?
That's the problem. I don't have, as I say, that's the thing that's happened since the band. I never found any way forward.
Yeah.
That's been hard.
Yeah.
I should have, in hindsight, I should have stayed probably in the music business, because it turns out that is what I can do, but it's too late. Missed my moment.
Yeah.
And so all this stuff coming back is a bittersweet kind of connection to it, because I can't get that back. It's only talking about the past. It's that thing, the only fools and horses thing, during the war, and everything's, oh no, don't talk about the war. During the band, shut up. It's all nostalgia.
Well, yeah, but there's always nice memories. So, well, what about you mentioned some tapes from 1, 2, 3 that were kind of circulating around?
They all went missing. Yeah, there's a couple have turned up, but there's about 3 or 4 1, 2, 3 songs. You can see them on YouTube. There's one of "I'm Lost Without You" was a good song we did. It's an edited version, but it shows you again what the kind of thing we were doing. The recordings are so distant. That America recording, it makes me cringe a bit, because it's not got that magic. It's kind of it's going through the motions. It's a poor recording, and it's also doesn't sound like one of our best. It's kind of just going through all the changes. The band was more vibrant than that. You can't capture that. That's the thing I'm sorry about. You can't really capture 1, 2, 3. What you can hear in that is how the arrangement worked, how all the imagination, the bit in the middle of it, a bit in the middle of Americas, where David did that concert for New York, when he did America. That's the bit he did, the bit that I did in the middle with the church organ.
Yeah.
If you listen to the Americans, a bit in the middle where I play the church organ. Let us be lovers. That David was in the audience, of course.
Okay.
So that's where you got that. Okay.
Okay. Got it. Well, I wanted to ask you, are there any more songs in the can or in the vaults from Clouds that might be come out? See light?
I think most of the stuff is on those bonus tracks. That was all the stuff we had. I've got loads of songs, as I say, but I never did anything with them. They're just all.
Yeah.
There's some on YouTube. Some of my songs are on there. Home recording things.
Yeah.
The guy who interviewed us for the Mojo magazine, he became a real fan, started a website for us, James Alexander, and he puts a lot of stuff on YouTube about us.
Yeah.
So you can hear a lot of my songs on that.
On that too, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Not Clouds, it's just my songs. There's some Cloud stuff there too, stuff that we did. But a lot of the ones that we did that were demos are on the. My biggest regret is Clockwork Soldier, because that should have come out in one of the records, because it's way ahead of its time too. Like a poetry thing.
Yeah,
it's poetry. I did a whole poem. That's a poem, and you can read the poem straight through like that, or you can read it across the way. You read it across the way and down the way. It's 2 different poems, and they both say the same thing. And that's that song, Clockwork Soldier. The other regret was it should have been sung, not spoken, because it's an actual tune. People say, oh, it's good, it's very avant-garde. No, it's not avant-garde. It's specific. It's a specific piece of music. It's not avant-garde. You listen to the tune in the background, that is the actual composition. It's just I'm not singing it, so you don't hear it.
Yeah.
I'm just what part of me sailed with my father's sperm. It should be what part of me sailed with my father's sperm, But you can hear the keyboard playing that. but I needed somebody. I
Yeah.
was conscious that I was much of a singer, so it'd be good to have somebody. I'd like to have somebody really good singing that.
Right.
I'd
Well,
like to have heard Rod Stewart singing Watercolor Days for the same reason. Somebody with a good
oh,
voice, you know.
oh, okay, I got you. Well, then the liner notes to that CD I have talked about you sounding a little bit like Jim Morrison.
That was a mistake. That was a mistake because I was so conscious I couldn't sing that well. People say to me, "Oh, you sound about like Jim Morrison." So I consciously adopted that a bit, and that was a double-edged sword because it made people think that was what it was. That made the songs suffered for that because the certain songs I did, like "The World Is a Madhouse," they thought, "Oh, it's just like a Doors song." No, the Doors could never have written that in a million years. It's
Right.
far too clever for them.
Right. Right.
So that pissed me off a bit, but it was my fault. I put myself there because I was conscious my voice wasn't very interesting.
Yeah. Well, can you think of anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's fine, Greg. I probably spoke too much.
No,
That's
you
another
didn't.
thing that happens.
No, you didn't. I like for people to talk. Makes it
Well,
easier.
we can always catch up again anyway sometime, you know, whatever.
Oh yeah. Oh sure we can. Oh sure we can. Well, like I said, it must be kind of rewarding though to, even though it's been decades later, find that you still have an audience and you still have people out there that like the music.
I can be surprised. Like I say, I was quite small things like that when the person who was at the show in Fillmore East
Yeah.
mentioned us. I thought you'd think they'd just go away from that concert, 1970, and
Right.
forget about it. And here we are today, and they still remember. And some guys have said that. Say, I thought they were great. I saw them opening for Jethro Tull at whatever. So
Yeah.
that's nice. I like that when they say that, especially from USA, because I've fond memories of the public. You know, the audiences were great. They were so generous.
Right.
They were so generous. Not like anywhere else in the world. At that time, they were so generous. They listen to you, no matter who. Bottom of the bill, don't matter. We'll listen. What are they like? They judge you for what you can do, not who you are.
Right. Right.
Which is not common.
Yeah.
That was what they did. They were so generous.
Yeah.
If you did a good performance, you got the applause, and that suited us because that was us.
Well, I don't know if it's changed these days, if we're still the same.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, you're talking 50 years ago now.
Yeah, right. We're a little more critical probably, but everybody is. Well, I appreciate it, Billy, and thank you for taking the time out to do this.
It was nice to talk to you, Greg, and
Yes.
keep in touch, and see what else happens.
I will. And,
check out that mosaic. You can see my hand in there.
There
It's
you go.
I said that. Well, it's the one at the top. I think I said on the Facebook thing. There's a right at the top of the mosaic. There's a white hand, and mine is the one to the right of that, which is all red and orange stripes. And the one below me that says 30 is Tony Visconti.
Oh, okay.
You know, who produced all this stuff.
And for viewers that don't know what we're talking about, that's David Bowie's friends, hands of David Bowie's friends. Yeah, a mosaic.
Friends and colleagues, you know, people that worked with him. It's about 69, I think, people on the 69 hands on that mosaic. I just think it's a lovely piece of art anyway. You know, I was surprised how good it is.
Yeah, check that out on Facebook. I saw that on there too as well.
It's doing a tour of all the museum malls and museums and things. It's doing a tour so Bowie fans can see. It might come to the States, I hope so.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's a tour at the moment of Britain.
Unique, that's a unique concept, you know.
Yeah, thanks very much anyway, Greg, and it's great to see you, and keep in touch.
Oh, yeah. Sure will, and I'll let you know when this is live, and you can post the link on your social media.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. That'd be nice.
Yeah, there you go. You never know what kind of reaction you're gonna.
You can edit out my worst bits.
Oh yeah. Oh, then we're only gonna have about 5 minutes.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough.
Just kidding. All right. Well, you have a good rest of the weekend, Billy. Okay.
Yeah, likewise. Take care.
And thanks
you so Greg. Much. Bye. I've got to find out how to switch this off now. Oh, there it is. Bye.